Are you ready to be unmessable with? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast where you get the inspiration, strategy, and coaching to be unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. And now, your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio.
Hello and welcome to the Be Unmessable With podcast. I'm your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and I am very excited about my guest today. Number one, he's a friend of mine. Number two, I have coached him for, a while now. And number three, he's like a genius. He's like a behavioral genius. So Blake Eastman is the founder of the Nonverbal Group, which is a behavioral research and education company. He focuses on teaching high level people skills. And he's coached executives and teams. His company is building, wait until you hear this, the largest database of contextually coded human interactions. So we're going to find out about that for sure. He also founded Behavioral Robotics, which is an AI deep tech startup teaching machines to read human behavior. And he's also known, this is one of my favorite things about him, he's known for conducting the largest behavioral study on poker players through his Beyond Tells project. And I'm just thrilled to have him here. But every time I'm on camera with him, I'm always like, what's my body language saying? I don't know. I'm afraid he's going to I have no idea. So I just gave up that concern. But Blake, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's interesting because I talk to you like every other week, so it's an interesting
Exactly. I'm like,
dynamic. Yeah.
here we are again. But tell us a little bit about how you ended up doing what you're doing, because it's such a fascinating and unique specialty.
I think I've always been. I mean, the truth is, I think I was for a very long time sort of scared of people. Had a lot of social anxiety when I was younger, and I think the origin of everything I do is probably the over intellectualization of people to make myself feel safe.
Mm.
So I found that by paying very careful attention to people, they weren't a threat to me. This has evolved a lot over the years in terms of like the practical aspect of it, but I truly believe that was the ground source of my sort of interest. And then I was a psychology professor and did a lot of research in academia and found it to be largely inefficient and just wanted to do it on my own, which led to the various studies we've done. I've always been like a person that doesn't like red tape and finds certain structures silly. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do it my own way. And that's kind of how everything started.
Which I love about you, because it has you be able to take risks that a lot of people would be constrained inside of their over analysis, or, things that mess with people, like that kind of analysis paralysis. You're, willing to just throw stuff out there and see what happens. And it makes me happy when you do that.
Yeah, no, it's a hard but rewarding way to approach life because people aren't going to always accept it, and you just need to do that level of testing and be out in the world to really see what works. Kind of something that you speak about, like, right? Like everything's in your head until it's action. Like action is the only thing that really reinforces those loops and gets you to where you need to be.
And how did you end up working with poker players, of all things?
I played poker professionally from like 21 to 25. So when I was my mom used to say Blake's an adjunct professor at the City University of New York, and he plays a little poker on the side. But the truth is, the bulk of the money was coming from poker, and I actually used the money from poker to start all my companies. So
Mm.
poker was an avenue that allowed me sort of the financial stability to push forward, and also probably where I learned that my risk tolerance is kind of crazy. It was from poker. Just the volatility and making a lot of money and losing a lot of money sort of left me with, to this day, like not appreciating, or something me and you've worked on,
Yeah.
maybe not appreciating money in the way that I should, or my sort of story or narrative around money is very entrepreneurial in nature and very like, I'll find a way. Like I'll find a way forward. And that's kind of why
Yeah.
poker got
The
into it.
the the
Yeah.
straight flush is coming.
Yeah,
I don't
I'll
even know
find
what
a
a
way to
straight
make
flush
money.
is. I have
Yeah,
no idea what I just
the
said,
straight
but
flush is not coming. It's
not
very
a thing.
rare.
Okay.
Yeah, very rare.
That's funny. I guess I won't be taking up poker as my
Yeah.
main gig. So tell me, you know that the work that we do together is all about developing the muscle to be unmessable with. Tell me something in your life, and I know you have, many things, as most people do, challenges that have presented themselves. Situations where you could have gone down for the count. You could have given up whatever it was, your vision, your dream, something, and you were able to transcend from that world of reaction and survival and being what I call messable with, shift over to that world of vision and creation and resilience.
Hmm.
What's an example of something like that in your life?
I mean, there's so many examples. There's a bunch of small. I've always found that the way out of, for me at least, is action. So whenever I feel like I'm being messed with, and this is something I learned from you, is like, what actions am I not doing? And I've always found that, like, even taking a pen and paper out and writing down, like, I need to do this and do this and do this. I think the biggest one was probably my dad. My dad was diagnosed with ALS 2 years ago. Oh no,
Yeah.
2.5 years ago. He passed away like 4 months ago, and that was a trickier one because it was a more complicated dynamic. So ALS is a disease that doesn't really have a treatment modality. Like 99.99999% of people die within 2 to 5 years. It's like a terminal illness.
Mm.
And there is the way that I would go about it, or me and my wife Molly would go about it, where it's like, and we did this, like, find every resource, find top doctors, find alternative treatments. But then it was sort of how my father was showing up for that, and being able to reconcile and see that, like, he had a version or a vision for what he wanted, and I had a version for what I wanted. And I think the biggest thing is being in this conversation of like growth and development and like making things work and all these things. Like, when other people are not showing up the way that you want, it could
Yeah.
kind of mess with you.
When people
And
don't seem as committed to their
exactly.
breakthroughs. Yeah, I get it. I mean, I remember when my grandmother is actually my husband's grandmother got diagnosed with cancer and she was like 89 or something and she wouldn't do treatment. And she was like, if he wants me, he can have me,
Mm,
which I would have been like you and Molly, like, let's get the best
right.
specialist, let's prolong, let's, extend. And sometimes that's not the mode to be in.
No, and sometimes more power is derived from accepting circumstances and making the best of your life. And like, the truth is, if I were to go back to ground one, like the day he got his diagnosis, knowing everything, it just would have been surrender. Let's go on 2 vacations. Let's do a bunch of other things. But you don't know that. So it's just sort of like projecting how you want someone else to show up, which is a source of a lot of people's suffering. Like, they think people should act a certain way. And the reality is people are going to act the way that they're going to act. And just that whole process, I found that, like, throughout the entire time, I don't know, just like quite impressed with myself, and just like the ability to not, I've talked to so many people that, like, family has a really challenging thing and their whole life gets derailed, and like, they're like, no, you don't understand, because my uncle or my mother, blah blah blah, and they go into that thing. And I mean, I kept the pace. I supported my family. I called every day. I went to New York every single month, multiple times. I took them on treatment, but I still did everything else that I was doing. And I know that my father wouldn't have wanted me to put my entire life aside for that either. Like, a
Yeah.
lot of the time, he was just so grateful that I was there and was like, thank you so much for coming. So, yeah, I think, and the truth is, I always say this, like, people think of coaching or personal development. Most people go to it when something is wrong. So something happens, and then, like, it's like the sales trigger, right? Like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed at work. I need to figure this out. But the truth is, I view coaching more as a scaffolding for your life so that you don't drift backwards. Right. So that, because I don't know what's going to happen next week or the week after. And like, you're building skill sets for a later version of yourself that might go through something that you can't imagine today. And that's why I think it's always just good to be in the conversation of development, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And, it's kind of like that movie Karate Kid. I love that movie, the original one with Ralph
Yeah.
Macchio. When he's, painting the fence and he's waxing the cars and he's doing all that sand in the floors and he has no idea how he's going to use those muscles.
Hmm.
But then when it comes to that moment of the karate match with Mr. Miyagi, it all comes to him as muscle
Hmm.
memory. And I think, in line of what you're saying, I'm aligned with what you're saying about the scaffolding. It's also like building muscle that you might not know where you're going to need it, how it's going to come kick into play, but you'll have it. You'll have it available for yourself in those moments. And if you look back to I guess it was really like the last year and a half with your dad, kind of declining, and all of the things that were happening with your family, and still creating your business and your marriage, and, just having been a newlywed and all
Mm.
of that. What would you say, if you can, isolate it to one or two things? What were the muscles that you relied on to be able to keep you in that space of creation and having it all, and not going into the sacrifice world of guilt and all of that?
I think the biggest muscle is establishing reality, the reality of a situation, the reality of a dynamic, like what's actually occurring as opposed to what you think is occurring. Uh, Probably that one is the ground. And then just also, I mean, this has been a muscle that was probably instilled or built by my mother, which was a challenge for my father because both me, my mom, and sister fundamentally think this way, and he doesn't. So we were more glass half full, his is more glass half empty. So like just the anchor of, I took him to treatment and I'm sitting in this room and there's people like my age in that room, like 35 years old, newlywed, same story as me and my wife. And then, the wife in this circumstance was diagnosed with ALS. So just being able to
Mm.
context shift and be like, wow, at least he was diagnosed here in a time period where he can use eye gazing technology to, and we can make him comfortable. Like, what would this be like 100 years ago? Or I just go to, no matter what you're going through, like somebody's always going through something relatively worse. So I just am really grateful for my own problems. And like, honestly, I'm that his diagnosis, you could call it, me and my wife joke that I gaslight myself all the time, but like the truth is that was the like, makes me emotional. Like that was the best gift he gave me because it's just very hard to get to me. Cause like, no matter what happens, I'm like, I don't have ALS. Like
Yeah.
I'm not dying. I'm not this. I'm not anything. And it's just such a powerful anchor. So even just like little things, like
Yeah.
I drove. 2 days ago, I scratched the entire car. I drove into a wall basically and scratched the entire side of my car, and
I
it
didn't
didn't
get
do
an
it.
email about that.
It did, yeah. It because I didn't even care. Like I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna have to. Maybe I'll pay out of pocket. Maybe I'll go for insurance. Wow, that was a stupid thing for me to do. But just like maybe like no sitting in it. No, oh my god.
Good for
No, my
you.
this. No, it's just like my head's not off. Like I'm intact, and I'm so grateful that that was my problem today. And just interacting with people and talking with people for so many years, and people go through real stuff, and
Yep.
everybody's version of stuff is real. But I don't know. I just believe that I'm very blessed, and for people that view themselves this way or articulate their their blessings, it's almost like a higher level of responsibility not to suffer. There's so much suffering in the world. Like I'm a refusal to go into that because like, don't take away the suffering from the person that's going to die in 3 days. Like it's just a really powerful anchor just to not let things bother you.
I think that's really great the way you're saying it. What that makes me think of is, like, let's say there were 100 suffering chips in the world.
Exactly. Yeah,
Like, I'm gonna take one,
exactly.
given what people are dealing with, and, Ukraine and whatever. It's
Hmm.
just, yeah. So I like that. I like it, like chips on the table.
Yeah,
I don't need a chip.
I said that to my dad. I was like, Dad, I was like, somewhere in Ukraine, someone's got the same thing as you and they're getting bombed. And he went like, like, I don't share that. I don't care right now. Like, and it's
It's
true. He's
it.
dying. Like, who am I to try to like port my worldview onto someone else, and even my father?
No, but that worldview supports you and not suffering about your
Exactly.
father's suffering. And
Hmm.
that is really, pain might be inevitable in many situations, but suffering is optional in many situations, because, the suffering comes from thinking something shouldn't be the way it is. There's no suffering in a gunshot wound. The suffering comes from, oh, that never should have
Hmm.
happened, and all that kind of stuff. So, and you and I share that tool to be able
Yeah.
to separate the shoulds.
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit. It's interesting. I never really thought about it before, but given you're the founder of Nonverbal Group, and then your father had ALS and was nonverbal,
Mm-hmm.
how did that, everything that you'd been working on all these years in your company and what you do with people, how did that support you and your family when all that was happening?
Yeah, that was one of the things he said to me. He was like, "This is such a joke that you have a company called the Nonverbal Group and I'm nonverbal." It really, first on the technology side, it really supported. Like I was able to understand and navigate like the eye gazing technology, like all the various technology that was out there. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's much better now than it was when he passed. Like even tools like the Vision Pro would have changed my dad's life because it would have given him
What's the
full
Vision Pro?
Apple's product, the headset. So it
Oh, the
has
headset, like
such
the
high
virtual
fidelity
reality.
eye tracking. So like I'm
Mm.
really happy about the future. Like 5 years from now, somebody with ALS will have a completely different world than like my father did versus 30 years ago. Like they're getting so much better at uh brain chip interfaces, so a chip that goes into your brain and allows you to navigate. So there's a lot of help coming for anybody, and it's not just ALS. There's tons
Yeah.
of things that can cause impaired strokes and a bunch of different things. But I think technology is going to solve a lot of that. So I was able to navigate that really well. From a communications perspective, honestly, it was tough because he lost a lot of facial movement. So he wasn't able to gesture, which is kind of weird, right? Like you look at somebody and you're so used to like, so I would come home, the first like year I'd come home and he'd see me and he'd like smile and get happy. But then after towards the end or towards the like 16, not even like 16 months in, he lost like facial control. And so it would be like I'd come home and it would just be like a stare.
Mm.
And you have to separate that that's not his actual emotional reaction to me. That's just his physical behavior and his physicality that's changed and has nothing to do with it. And then he would like write like, so glad to see you, like da, 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 da. But it's weird because it's a mismatch from what you're normally used to experiencing.
And especially given your mastery and your expertise, which is,
Yeah.
teaching people how to read
Yeah.
facial
And
expressions and body language and all of that.
part of it's knowing when not to like pay much attention to it or to dial. And that was an example of it was just wow, like no facial, but it shows how weird it is. It becomes where it doesn't feel like the person because you're so used to their patterns and their movements and their gestures, and all of a sudden they're just like flat, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, this is kind of weird. But yeah, that was an interesting challenge.
And when you work with people in companies or individuals, what do you find messes with people the most in the arena that you work with people in?
I mean, so many different things. I think one of the big there's themes. So the themes, we say that like the objective function or like what we try to do is like maximize the amount of value we add and extract from social interactions and minimize the suffering. I think for a lot of people, there's just a lot of suffering that comes from a byproduct of working with other people,
Mm.
or
So say
living with
more,
other
yeah, say more
people.
about that,
So like in so many different ways that people should show up a certain way or act a certain way. People should respond to their needs. People should know or be accommodating to me because I have this label or this condition or this whatever. And yeah, you just sit there and get angry at the world instead of understanding how to really like navigate through people. And then there's just other things like behavioral blind spots. Like, for example, listening comes up a lot. There's a big difference between perceived listening versus active listening. So some people, for whatever reason, process like behavior and interactions differently than others. So when they're listening, they might just sit there and just listen. And they don't move their face, they don't shake, they don't nod, they don't smile, they don't smirk, but they don't look like they're listening. So
right.
people go, you're not listening to me. And they're like, what are you talking about? I listen to every word. So there's just weird behavioral patterns that cause people problems. And then, there's so many. There's like a social projection, like people show up, people try to be something that they're not, which creates weird behaviors, that creates weird perceptions. There are language patterns in people that they're just not aware of. And the really interesting thing is when you're in this world, you're navigating this concept of intent and awareness. So it's like when you see someone do a behavior, it's like, do they have the awareness of that? Do they even know they did that? And the
Hmm.
second is, did they intend on it? So I've worked with a lot of people that are really good people and have really interesting social origin stories. but the way that they come across isn't, they don't intend it. And then you show them on video and they're like, I'm a bit of an asshole in meetings. And you're like, yeah, you are. And they just have a complete disconnect. So I've just had so many experiences like that. I always say, like, if you touch someone, you would see their entire origin, like everything in their life. You would just be like, oh, that makes sense. But we don't really like do that. We just kind of go to snap judgments and making assumptions and assertions about people that are not. And a lot of that's also just like the random body language silliness. Like if somebody crosses their arms, they don't like you. It's like not true. It's just, there's not real research based on that. Or somebody could smile and not be happy. Somebody could, frown and not be sad. Like it's probably the most complicated puzzle in the world because it's so multifaceted.
And so here you are building this AI tool to read human behavior and all of that, and you work with people to actually have some power in this area rather than having it be a mystery. What do people accomplish out of working with you? What are they then able to do that they're not able to have access to without those tools?
Yeah, I think people think of me as like it's funny. It's like people think of me as like a highly, I don't know, reductionist kind of approach because I talk so much about like the smile timing or morphology difference in someone's smile and like all these really new, and that's the cool stuff and it is interesting. But like the distinction I always try to say is like it's about seeing people, not reading people. So seeing people for like all of their strengths and weaknesses and all of that. And really the way that I teach to people to read behavior is more of like a coach's perspective. So like when I see someone, like one of the most helpful tips is I don't see people for them. I don't take their behavior and connect that to their disposition or person. I just see it as behavior. So if somebody's like yelling at me, I'm not like, oh my God, I'm being yelled at. Who is this person to yell at me? I'm like, interesting. Like this person yells as a mechanism to get what they want. And that is a way, it's just hard to mess with me in a social dynamic because it just like kind of like passes through me. Like I'm not, so most people are taking things so personally that they become so reactive that they just can't navigate the dynamic. But like learning people, the skill set's so much more robust than anyone really imagines. Like a lot of it is going back to your own personal origin story and understanding how you perceive the world and all the things in your life that has led to you to view social interactions and why you're scared of people and why you like certain people and not other people. It's this constant process of awareness. So it's like self-awareness. It's like behavioral awareness, which is like actually aware of people's physical behavior. And then the most important thing is social awareness, which is aware of the social norms and constructs and hidden rules that govern a social interaction, which some people don't really understand. Like
I think most people probably don't understand. It's more in the background than the foreground. I don't think
it's not written down anywhere. It's just this expectation. Like, so I was at a corporate, oh my God, I was observing a meeting and the CEO, they were saying what were the things that this company could improve on. So CEO goes first and he takes 2 to 3 minutes. COO goes 2 to 3 minutes. CTO goes 2 to 3 minutes. And then a new hire starts speaking for 12
minutes.
12 minutes. I'm like sitting there and everybody around is like, what's this person? And he's going in different directions and like doing all, and he like, that's a simple theme. Like there's a power dynamic here. There's a hierarchical dynamic here. It's just like, you should probably match the amount of time length that everybody else
wants,
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And you see this in coaching, right? Like you're coaching 6 people. One person goes on for 35 minutes, not understing that there's a structure here.
And I don't know what you're talking about. That's never happened in one of my group coaching sessions. I have no idea what you're talking about.
And it's like, well, I'll tell you one thing. That's like one of my favorite things is because a lot of people see these things in social interaction, but they can't say anything about it because it's hard. But like, I totally can. I'm like, hey, you're dominating the whole conversation. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Why are you speaking for 15? And then I'm so sorry, everyone. I just get in my head. And you see that most of the time it is not some sort of evil intention. It's just, they don't lack the awareness.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
It really, I mean, I'm sure if I had you come and be a fly on the wall in some of my sessions with groups, you would see it left and right. And actually, I should probably have you do that. I should send you a video of something and
break it down.
Yeah, you could break it down and I could, have that to offer people and to elevate their performance, because whatever you're not aware of, you can't impact.
That's why we love video so much, like, is because of the fact that it's truth. Like in a world of like opinions and perceptions, video is just data. How you interpret the video isn't truth, but like the actual just video is just like pixels moving. So it's kind of a ground truth for understanding things.
Yeah, no, I love that. So what do you think if what would you offer people as like an action or an actionable access that they could start doing like today, just out of, watching this or listening to this podcast, what could they do that would have them be more aware of those kind of unspoken, unwritten rules or the behavior or something that could support them?
I would have them watch video themselves. So what you want to do, people watch video through themselves through a lens of what they want to change, not through a lens of what's effective or not. So they're like, I remember I was working with this woman who gave like probably the worst presentation I've ever seen in my life. She was like all over the place. She was like looking at the floor. She was all this. So we pull up the video and I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. You watch the video first. And the first thing she said, I'll never forget this. She's like, I need a nose job. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not the scope of what we're trying to do right here. Like, we're trying to focus on effectiveness. So people view themselves through the lens. But what you want to really do is like your patterns of behavior when you're the most comfortable are probably the patterns that are the most effective. So it's when you like try to be something that you're not, that's where all the weird stuff comes up. So like you can look at yourself in a meeting and look at what your face looks like and your social coordination, like how you nod and how you squint and all these things when you were genuinely interested versus when you were just kind of like sick of the conversation and want to be like, okay, like I've had enough, like let's go. And it provides you an insight into like how the world's experiencing you in those various layers. I just think video work is like the most
Yeah.
important thing to do because otherwise it's just like a bunch of people's opinions about how you should be or how you should speak or blah, 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 blah. So like video gives
I
you a little
think
bit of
you're
truth.
spot on because, if you think about it, when you're working with people, you work a lot with video,
Yeah.
in your courses and you have people videotape them. I do the same thing when I'm training a coach. I watch the video or listen to the audio of their coaching session and I go through the transcript. I'm just like right here and look right there. What did you just do right there? What was going through your mind right there? And why didn't you say this right there? Like it's like an athlete being
Yeah.
able to look at a tape of your layup is going to be way more useful than somebody giving you the theoretics of angles for your wrist and whatever that is,
Yeah.
So I think people don't use it enough.
And video is like it doesn't lie in the sense that like if you tell someone you were coming across a certain way, they don't have awareness of like their exact pitch, tone, like they don't know. But if you show
Right.
them a video, it's just like, oh yeah, you're right. Like it dissociates you from the interaction, which lets you learn a little bit more. So just a powerful tip. And I like if you had Zoom meetings or if you have conversations or, sit down, record a conversation with your husband or wife or partner or whatever and watch a video together and you'll see all the themes of like, oh wow, you talk 80%, they talk 20%, or they brought up something important and you cut them off. Like you can just see it all when you're detached from it.
That's great. That's great. And is there anything you want to let the listeners know about that you're creating, what's coming up next for you, what people can
I'm
participate with
doing
you
so
in?
right now. Doing so many random things, but they all have a central
They're
through
not
point.
random.
Yeah, no,
Don't
they're
say
not.
that.
Yeah, that's what you help me on, making sure I'm focused. I think our Social Edge program is
Yeah.
probably the coolest thing. It's just the most robust social skills course ever created, and like the cool thing is when you go through the program, you have conversations on like a twice a month and our software breaks it down and can find all the behavioral blind spots and everything that's like actually going on with you. And for some people will say like, I don't know why I can't establish a friendship. We can like tell you, we can be like, all right, here are
It's
the
amazing.
behaviors and patterns and things that you're doing to create that, which have deeper mechanistic reasons, but at least once you're starting to become more aware of the behavior, you can see the deeper aspects to it.
Beautiful. Okay, so I'll put that all in the show notes with links so that they can find you easily and sign up for your newsletter because every week I
Yeah.
look forward to your newsletter. It's,
Thank you.
one of my favorite newsletters that I get, and I get a lot of newsletters. So yeah, yours and Molly's and mine all come out the same day. So
Yeah, we're all Monday folks. Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. And
Exactly.
I always talk to you Tuesday, so I get your newsletter insights, and then I get to talk to you on Tuesday. It's
That's
perfect.
right. It's too funny. Any last words that you want to just leave people with or say?
No, just like yeah, the conversation of being unmessable with and not suffering in life is just a very useful pursuit. And no matter what you're going through, there is some access to not suffering or reducing the suffering at a level that, and it's just, you should work towards that instead of sitting in it.
Yeah, beautiful. Because, being unmessed with doesn't mean having perfect
No,
circumstances. I
no, not
wish,
at
but
all.
not real,
Yeah,
It's about how you be in the face of what real life is, like your dad with
exactly.
ALS or my
Yeah.
mother with her stroke or, you know, all of real life that we all deal with. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me
Thank
and be
you.
with us.
Yeah.
And, for those of you listening, I'll give you all the info about Blake, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Be Unmessable With podcast. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Be Unmessable with the podcast. And I am so happy that you spent some time with us. And I want to make sure that every time you spend time with us, you get value. So I want to offer you a free workshop on resilience and unmessable withness. So if you click below, Dr. Kathy Connor and I put together this workshop, and it's free, and it'll give you a world around the difference between resilience and being unmessable with, not only from my perspective, but from a neuroscientist's perspective. So, those of you that love that world of neuroscience, click below and get the workshop for free. See you on the next episode.